In this video, we're going to be setting up a World of Warcraft server. Please note that if you're doing this by means of a virtual machine, I already am expecting you to have some form of general knowledge as to how to set up the virtual machine. There's many ways, for example, VMware, VirtualBox, whatever you'd like, maybe a hypervisor, whatever it is. You can by all means set it up. Just put on a standard Ubuntu or a Windows, whatever you'd like. But also keep in mind that you can do it just with your Windows computer as well. In this video, we're going to be using Ubuntu on a actual dedicated server that I own. And so we're going to do it via GUI, but we're also going to be doing it with a terminal. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, you can go to either, as I said before, Contabo or OVH to pick your server. You don't need a dedicated server. You can go and just get a VPS, whatever you'd like. If you're starting out with just a couple of friends or so, honestly, you can totally get by, I would say, with the $750 a month according as of date, the pricing. When it comes to the VPSs for OVH, on the other hand, it gets kind of iffy. You're going to have to pay a little bit more, probably the comfort level, and they're promotional, or maybe even possibly the VLE4. It really is dependent. You want the sweet spot essentially of anywhere between 4 to 7 cores and anywhere between, honestly, 6 to 10 gigabytes of RAM. You can technically do 4 cores and 4 gigs of RAM and be super slim, but you're really pushing it and you might experience some issues. I would never run that low, but hey, you do you. In this case, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be using a VMware ESXi setup. We're installing Ubuntu. So in this case, you can see here, I have, let's take a look, see here. You can see here I have allocated roughly 12 gigabytes of RAM with 6 CPU cores and 50 gigabytes of a hard disk, which is on an HDD. And typically you would want to run this on a SSD, but I don't really have the space, and this is just for experimental and showcasing anyways. When you first start up Ubuntu, if you're not familiar with it, you're going to want to install it because you can actually try Ubuntu without installing it, but then everything is erased. So we're going to go to installing Ubuntu. We're going to pick our language. And keep in mind that when you're, as I go through this, and you can just see what checkboxes I press and everything else, keep in mind that when you're buying a VPS, you may not get access to the GUI. It may be what we call a headless, in which case you will only be seeing a terminal. Now, that being said, I will show you how to install this via terminal as well, as most of our commands are in fact going to be via the terminal. It just makes things a lot easier on Linux. It is also actually why Linux is one of the better operating systems, honestly, just because of everything you can do. This will delete all your programs, documents, perfect, and install. This is going to take a little bit of time, so I'm going to fast forward essentially until it's complete, and voila! Right, so we got this now fully installed. Now we're going to go into Firefox. If you don't have a GUI, you can do this through your actual computer. You're more than able to just follow along doing it that way. This is just specifically because we have a VM, so I'm going to be doing it here. There's no real difference. And we're going to type in Azeroth Core and Trinity Core. Now, depending on your type or your choice per se, you're able to pick whatever you'd like, but the installation might be only slightly different. There's no real difference I'm going to show you for Linux. So if we go Trinity Core, and then over here, Azeroth Core installation guide, Trinity Core will go how to compile. You'll see that the requirements for the classical installation, which is a little bit more difficult, but fairly the same for both, is very similar. So in Linux, you have commands basically that you type in. You'll see here in the GUI, we have a terminal, and in this terminal, we type everything. Now, your Windows machine also has the same thing that you can see right here. However, it's not exactly the same. For example, I can ls and see that I have folders here. I can ls and see that it doesn't exist, you see? So it runs on a different series of commands, and that's just because it's a different type of operating system. However, that's just to keep in mind. Don't try to run these commands on your Windows machine. This is for Linux only. If you were to do this on Windows, you'd have to run through the Windows guide. Nevertheless, we're going to take a look at these updates here. apt-get update, apt-get install git clang cmake, and then all these update alternatives. You can see here on Azarath Core, if we go to Linux requirements, it may look slightly different. Ubuntu with MySQL apt-get update, and then we have the and sign. Now the and sign basically says to grab the apt update and get to install it and install everything else. That's pretty much what it's saying. So the only real difference between these two are the update alternatives. However, we're going to be primarily doing the Azarath Core. So all you're going to do, legitimately, is you're going to copy this entire string and you're going to put it inside the terminal. Now, in this case, if you are, for the first time, connecting over to this, okay? Say this is your virtual machine and you don't have an address. Well, normally with VPSs, they have what we call SSH. So I'm just going to quickly install SSH. You're only going to need SSH if you do not have access to your server. So if you're, for example, I don't know, doing exactly what I'm doing, except it's abroad, like for Contabo or OVH, but they didn't give you it, and it said they did it through other means. However, that's never going to happen because they always do it correctly. Nevertheless, though, what you're going to do is you're going to install SSH. Please, for the love of God, do not do this manually. I'm just showing you that this is how you would do it. And voila. Now that I have an SSH key, it's going to say, hey, you know, here's your SSH2 keys and blah, blah, blah. Now, technically, what I can do is I can now type iwconfig, or I'm sorry, ifconfig. Oh, I need to install NetTools, so you might have to do the same here, NetTools. And what this command does is it basically just gives us our IP address. Now, this is for your local network. If this was a actual server you needed the IP for and you need to figure out the IP, say it's a Windows machine or something of the sorts. Again, you don't need SSH for a Windows machine, but hey, you would have to type in what's my IP. But we're looking for a local IP here. So we're going to do ifconfig. And we're going to see here that the address is 192.168.45.61. Now, if I go into command prompt here, and I type SSH root at 192.168.45.61, it should then pop up the fingerprint. Hey, you know, I'm not sure about this, can't be established. What's going on here? You know, is this real? And you're going to type in yes. Now it's going to ask me for a password. Well, I didn't make the root account, so we're not going to go for root. Instead, we're going to go for WoW. Because remember, we created the account name WoW. So we're going to type WoW, and now it says, okay, that's great and all, but now what's your password? So we're going to type in our password, and now we're actually inside the computer. If you don't believe me, that's okay, let me show you. If I go to desktop here, and I'll explain these commands here in a moment, but if I go to desktop here, and I make a directory, aka a folder, I'm going to name it, hi, I am on your computer. Alright, now we're going to take a look, and we're just going to be like, oh, look, I'm normal, and here's the folder. So everything we do is actually being done right here. So you can see how instead of going to the directory and be like, okay, now I gotta go desktop, then I gotta go right click, new folder, everything can be done via terminal. So just for visual clarity, that's what's being done here. So now, technically speaking, what I can do is I can now go to the Azarath Core website. I'm just doing it quickly here on my other screen. I can go to installation guide, go to the classical installation, go to requirements, go to Linux requirements, and I can just copy and right click into my Windows terminal here and just download everything. We're going to copy this and paste it. And paste it. And paste it. There we go. That took a hot minute. Now it's going to ask for the password. And voila. Now we have this going. And you'll see here that if we head back to the wonderful website, none of this is going on. Now, this is one of the reasons why it is critically important to, just really quickly, we're just going to press Y here while we talk about this, to disable SSH. SSH is a fundamental security risk. So you might be asking, how do I disable this? Well, you can do it a few ways. You can either type in, for example, sudo systemctl stop sshd.service, or just hit tab, usually, to finish it. Or you can type sudo systemctl disable sshd service. Now, keep in mind, stop will stop the service, and disable will stop it from booting up. So if you want it to never come back up, you have to type in disable. Now, something else you can do, though, other than turning off SSH, if you have direct access, of course, is you can go and actually change the port. So by default, SSH is on port 22. Now, when you get an OVH server and a Contabo server, what ends up happening is all the original IP addresses get scanned constantly from bots. And these bots then attempt to try and crack the passwords. This is nearly instantaneous from the moment that you buy a VPS. So from the moment you buy the VPS and they give you the SSH credentials, you are already basically being brute forced. Now, it is not from a competitor, it is just from a unknown entity. Let's put it that way. Now, what you can do to kind of mitigate this is by going into the SSH folder configuration file and changing the default port. So let's get into actually how to move around this terminal while we're downloading the requirements for the server. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this wider. And we're going to fill up my whole screen with this. And we're just going to make sure that this is saving. Perfect, it is. And we're going to clear this. Now, ls stands for list. Now, you can do ls-l to get more details on directory, read, write, execute, and all this neat information. You don't have to worry about that for now. All you need is ls. Now, what you can also do is type cd to move around, which stands for change directory. So we can change directory into desktop, and now we're in desktop. We ls, and we see the folder, hi, I'm on your computer. Now, what we can also do, in this case, if we clear, is we can head to the directory of the SSH configuration file. Now, what we can do is slash or cd slash etc. But you're like, wait, etc doesn't exist here. Well, that's because it's in a directory backwards. And the way you go back with a directory is 2 dots. So we do cd ... until you're at the /home, you ls. Okay, we see it's just WoW. This is the user file of Windows, essentially, but for Linux. We ls again, and here we are in the main brain, if you will. And now we're going to see here for our etc folder, it should be right about here. There it is. So we're going to cd into etc. We're going to cd into SSH because we know SSH already exists, but I'm just showing you. So we're going to now cd into SSH. And now what we're going to do is we're going to nano. Let's look here briefly. You can see the files are here. We're going to now nano the SSHD config setting. So we're going to type just nano SSH config. And now you can see here, we can go up and down essentially. Now, typically, the listening address would be enabled, which means it's like this, which means that it's listening to the entire world and broadcasting. Luckily, it's just on my computer, if you will. And the default port is 22. This right here is where you would change the port address to whatever you wanted. So in this case, if you want to make it something ridiculous, you can, whatever you'd like. Now, in order to move around, it's just the arrow keys on your keyboard, and then, of course, your standard typing. Now, keep in mind, if you want to leave, you can hold down Control on your keyboard and you hit X. You can see the buttons down here. All these up arrows are the control buttons, so don't be confused by it. And then just hit X. It's asking if you want to save. If you want to save and you made changes, you would have to press Y and then Enter. And then it's going to ask you for your file name that you want. In this case, I'm just going to cancel out and hit No, and then we're back out. Now, it may not let you in this case, because you can see here it says it's unwritable. Oh no! Well, that's where administrator, where you right-click something in Windows, for example, and it says run as an administrator, works, because you type sudo nano sshd, and voila! Now you're able to run it as sudo. And you can see here it's no longer giving us that issue. So if you ever run into that sort of problem, sudo is your best friend. Now, with that being said, let's take a look here. It seems like we're still running, and we finished just in time. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're going to install Azeroth Core. So now you may be asking, but how do we install Azeroth Core? Well, we follow the guide, and we simply go to the next command line. So we can do this. We can clone it just like this, or we can go to the website. So if you want to go to the website, on, say, your computer, or you're doing everything through GUI and you're starting to miss your Windows machine, you can go to code and then you can download a zip. However, it's a lot better if instead what we do is we copy the command. So what we're going to do is essentially go into desktop and create our directory. So we're going to make a directory and we're going to call it WoW server. We're going to cd into WoW server. And we're going to create the git. We're going to pull it, essentially. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to copy this command. We're not going to use our Windows machine for the time being. We're going to do everything through the actual terminal itself, just because it's prettier and the Windows terminal isn't there. There's special terminals you can get, but in this case, I'm just going to use this one. We're going to clone this in this directory. And now we are cloning. And this basically just means that we're copying it over, realistically. It's nothing too fancy, honestly. So now we're receiving all objects, and it is pulling. In the meantime, however, something that you should know is that we have we have a MySQL server. Now, if you're trying to access your MySQL server, and it's not working for you, that's because the bind address on your MySQL server is linked to your local host, which is a very common problem with setting up your WoW server. And you might even be asking, what is a MySQL server? Well, let's get into that while we wait. So essentially, with a MySQL server, it is is a database for your server. So we're going to take a look here. And what a MySQL server does, essentially, is it hosts the data. And so when you have the data, you have to use something, for example, called HideSQL. If we go over here on HideSQL, you can see it is a MySQL editor. Now, in order to access the SQL, you have to type in the address, or location, rather. And you're going to get a pop-up similar to this, where, for example, it's going to be unnamed, 127, root, default password, and 3306. Now, in this case, whether or not we put in the IP of this server, it is not going to work. So we need to get that set up and going. So what we're going to do in the meantime, quote unquote, while that finishes, even though it's done, is we're going to go into SQL. So we're going to cd backwards, just bear with me here, cd backwards, all the way until you reach this point. Then from that point, we're going to go into etc. MySQL, and then we're going to go and check in here. Now, you might have to do some roaming about. I'm pretty sure it's this directory on the path I'm doing. I'm just checking here really quickly. Nope, that's the wrong file. Ah, here it is. So it's etc. MySQL, mysql.conf.d. We're going to nano inside of the file which is nano mysqld.cnf, and you'll see right here that it is the user MySQL with the port 3306. Now you can see once again we had the error that we weren't able to edit it, so we're just going to type sudo. We're going to go down to the port and we're going to enable it. Additionally, you may be running into this issue where the bind address is in fact just 127. This needs to be modified to 0.0.0.0, and additionally, I would recommend the same thing within MySQL X bind address to 0.0.0.0. However, keep in mind that this address will now be active. Now, this is, like I said before, one of the important ports to never have open. So you may be asking yourself, how do I access this? How do I go about it? Unfortunately, we're not going to cover it in this video. However, the simplest route that you can do for the minimal amount of security is just changing the port. However, once again, that's not going to do you much help, especially if someone knows what they're doing. It's just making their life slightly longer than average. Now, once we got that finished off, and we have that modified, we have to do systemctl restart mysql. And then we're going to hit tab, and you're going to see it completes the list. Now it's going to ask us for our password. We're going to type in wowser, and we're waiting for it to finish, and you'll see that it's done. In order to check that it's done, we can check by typing in status instead of restart. Now, the way I just did that, and you can see, of course, now it's active and running. The way I just did that is just by pressing the up arrow on your keyboard. You'll see that, or as you can see, rather, once you start using a terminal, you start moving really fast, and it goes a lot quicker. But here we can see the memory. It's using the CPU power, if you will. The server's operational. There's no issues, the process, everything else. So it gives you the data that you need. Now, taking it one step further, for example, now we have to install the actual core in the meantime. And then we're going to go back to the SQL. So we're going back and forth, essentially. Now, we're going to head back to our main directory, which is just cd. And we're going to head to our desktop, which is WoW server. If it allows me inside. WoW server. Oh, I keep uncapitalizing. One thing to note, like you just saw here, it really matters on your capitalization. So using capital letters in Linux is not the smartest idea. So now we see here that it finally finished pulling. So it's called Azeroth Core Wrath. But we want to rename that, right? Like, who the heck wants to have an Azeroth Core Wrath of Lich King? So we're going to name it to Azeroth. No, let's make it 335 source. Now, the move command essentially is like the cut command. Now, we can use a rename command, but I just prefer move. So mv, the entire directory to 335 source. And you'll see here, now it is renamed to 335 source. Once again, though, as I just told you, it is not good with capital letters. So we're going to make it no longer capital S, but rather lowercase s. We're just going to go backwards here and hit tab, so then it completes it. Remove that, just so I had the slash sign. And now we're going to check it again, and voila. Now we're going to go into here, and you're going to see a bunch of files. Now we're going to make even more files. So we're going to make directory, build, and in this build path, what we're going to do is we're going to head onto the next command, which is this large cmake command. So now we're going to copy this. We're going to go into our terminal, and we're going to paste. And by the way, just copying is double clicking, right clicking, copy, and then right clicking here, and then hitting enter. So now we're going to hit enter. And just so you understand what this is doing essentially, is it's going to create the files to compile the code. The most important ones that you should be aware of, I suppose, is the prefix on the installation path, the compiler, which is a Clang, and then the tools, if you want to build the tools in order to compile your own DBC files and such, as well as your map files, and then the scripts. You can scroll down, or at least it used to be here. Maybe it's on the Linux, the Trinity Core side. as to what they all do. They're pretty interchangeable, honestly, in terms of commands. So if you can't find something on the Trinity Core version, you can typically find it on the Azeroth Core or vice versa. So we're going to scroll down here. Here they are. You can see here on the Trinity Core side that the commands are listed, warnings, a script, PCH, and 1 or 0 issues whether or not it's going to work or is disabled. There's all kinds of different commands. And you can see here as well, that's why this equals 1, this equals static. You can really pick it apart essentially. But for now, we're going to compile it just as it is. And we're going to accept it. Now, it did shoot an error. It does say that it does not appear to contain cmake list.txt. Now, this is because it's looking for the directory behind it. So what we have to do is, while we made the directory build, we have to cd into the directory build and then run the command. Because it's cmake, the like program, if you will, // which means basically, hey, check the backside directory, which has all the code. So it was actually checking the WoW server directory for the code, which was just a file. And now run everything. So now we're going to hit enter. You're going to see a bunch of cool stuff, make you feel really cool. You're going to see that all the configurations are now set up. Yes, it's going to build tools. Yes, with scripts, with modules, with tests, with PCH, without PCH, show warnings, yada, yada, yada. Here's all the founds. You hope that this works, by the way, and there's not something that's missing. Because if there's something that's missing, like this, it can get complicated. However, some things can miss, just like you saw. And then scroll down, here's the tools, and the generation has been done. If it says right here, done, written to, you are blessed. Now, you're going to type make -j the amount of cores you have on your server. Now, in my case, let's take a look here. I have approximately 6 cores. So what I'm going to type is make -j -6. Now we're going to hit enter. We're going to see what it says. And it says, hey, you can't do -6. You're wrong there. That doesn't make sense. You're right. There is no -6. And the reason I wanted to show you this is because if you ever get confused, the options will show you what you can and can't do. For example, -j right here allows a number of jobs at once. Infinite jobs with no argument. You see here, -j number. So you can do the same way here. You can do help, you can do -i. These are essentially the man pages of Linux to basically help you get to know, hey, this didn't quite work, this doesn't make sense, please re-explain it. So we're going to do make -j6. Now, we told it specifically in this command up here where to put the files, and we're just going to allow it to be wherever we want it to be, essentially. Wherever we told it to make, we're going to allow it to make. In this case, it's $AC. So, with that out of the way, let's take a look what's going on with the GUI itself. If we go here, we can see it's on desktop, WoW server 335 source, and you're like, where is it? Well, if we go to home, and we go desktop, it's also right here. And this is everything that we've been doing and is currently building. And you'll see here on the Linux machine, it is right here, hidden in the corner. And you may be asking, well, why is it all the way in the corner? Well, that's just Linux for you. It can be really weird sometimes, and we don't know why. We do know why, but we don't like admitting that there's flaws in our beautiful machine. Now, this is going to take a ridiculous amount of time. So, in the meantime, what we can do is we can head back to the Azeroth core and head to the server setup. Now, it's going to say, hey, you need to have these extractors. This is how you're going to do all the files. However, we're not going to want to do extraction unless we have to. Now, we're going to try this together, as I'm not 100% sure that this is going to work anymore. It used to work, but as you can see, the timestamp is roughly 2 years ago, but nevertheless, you're going to download the data. that's located on the directory. If you see at the bottom left, by the way, it shows you the links. So if you're ever wondering, well, how do I download this on Linux? What you can do is you can copy the link wherever you are, go into wherever you want to go, and then type wget with the command of where the location is. Then just hit enter. It starts talking, and now it's going to begin the download. You can see kind of like a little imaginary bar here, which is really cool. Now, Azeroth Core used to give out data all the time. However, it seems like for the most part, that does not happen anymore. So you may have to do client compiling. However, I'm going to try and leave that in a different video. As far as I understand, though, when it comes to Trinity Core, they should be giving you the files itself. So let me see here. Making install, cd into directory. That's pretty much correct. I'm just reading through here at the moment. It seems like they also do not give you the map files, which is interesting. But they should. Well, in that case then, I'm going to show you how this will work. So, typically, what happens when you run these commands is you're going to get compilers. The compilers, I'll show you where they are in a moment. Now, these compilers usually are specifically for the operating system that you compiled it on. So if you're on a Windows machine, you can only use the Windows compiler. If you're on a Linux machine, you can only use the Linux compiler. Now, this is where it gets annoying. If this happens, you have to quite literally download your client onto your WoW machine and then extract the files on that machine. Or you can do what I do to make things a lot easier, which I'm going to just quickly go through all my files here really quick and pull it up. Here we are. I'm just making sure there's not that much being shown in there. Wonderful. Or you can do what I do, which is basically extract the files yourself, which in this case, you compile the core on your computer first, or you get the map generators of your core version, but usually you have to compile it on your computer first. So you go through basically the entire core installation on Windows side. Then you grab the map generators that come from the core. You drag and drop them into a client, your World of Warcraft client that you see here. This would be like a wow.exe file, but this path is severely modified. And you just double click the generator. First, it's map extractor. You wait for it to generate, and it's going to create a map file. Here, I'll show you since I don't have a map. See, it pops up, and it starts generating, and you're going to see here in a moment, it's going to generate a maps file. Now, I'm going to cancel this because I have a lot of custom stuff. So, after the maps, then you do the map extractor, which is surprisingly actually working, even though it shouldn't. And then after that, you have to create, once it finishes, allow it to complete, you have to create a vmaps folder manually in your computer. And then you have to go, hold down shift, right click, open PowerShell here, and type the following /vmap assembler space buildings space vmaps, because there's a buildings file right here. You hit enter, and now it's going to generate. And you can see it says, okay, all done. When it's done, it's going to take a while. It's just because there's only a few buildings because I canceled out it early. Once you're done with that, then you have to run the mmap generator. The mmap generator is going to say mmaps doesn't exist because once again, you have to create the mmaps folder. And then you can run the mmaps generator, to which then it builds everything for you. Now, there is files a bat file that will run all of these commands for you. Be on the lookout for it. It may something like run me or something with the generation. Sometimes the engines do not give you this, but this is what you have to do. Afterwards, you grab the files that are, let's see here, maps, vmaps, mmaps, and dbc. You zip them all up. I'll show you really quickly. You just right click, show folder, send to, zip folder. You zip them up, and then you upload them to a site. You don't want to go through the FTP route unless you know what you're doing, and because it can be annoying. You zip them up to a site, you upload them there, like say Google Drive, but Google Drive is really annoying to deal with on terminal, so I would recommend like Mediafire or somewhere easier. Upload them there, give yourself the link, download the files, and then here you are with your file set. Now, we're going to hope that this simple site, if you will, works. If this works, you're going to see it firsthand. If not, we're going to cry. So we're going to go and we're going to type ls, and we're going to type unzip data.zip. Now, it's very possible that it says that it does not exist, but it does. And now we have the maps being unzipped. In the meantime, we're going to check on the server, and we see that it is 100% completely compiled. There were no issues, so now we're going to be able to complete it. If there are issues, it will pop up giving you the error here, and that is where essentially you show your core dev saying, hey, there was a problem with this. It seems though that there is absolutely no problems or even warnings, so there's no issue. And now what we type is make install. This is going to basically grab everything together and put it into executables. So now it's grabbing it all. Do. And we're going through the maps at the same time, of course, because you can always press additional terminals or connect. And we see here that it did not create, and the reason is, with the error, need administrative privileges. So we're going to hit the up arrow, and we're going to type sudo. Now we're going to type the password for it, once again, wowzer, and you'll see here again, it will have no issues. And you can see here as well on the other side that these files are now complete. DBC, maps, mmaps, vmaps, and cameras. Now, we want to move all this into a data folder, essentially, which is also inside of a compiled source folder. So what we're going to do is we are going to see where it installed it to, which seems to be environment, distribution, bin, auth server. So we're going to, unfortunately, have to go to that path. We're going to check in here, and you'll see that it is now done. So we're going to check into bin, and you see we have all of our extractors, all of our auth servers, the assemblers that I was mentioning to you about earlier, and everything in here. Now, what we need to do, because we chose this pathing, if you do not want this pathing on environment dist bin, you must change the path right here. You have to change this path. And then, it's not an issue whatsoever. However, I didn't change it, so therefore it spit it out. Anyways, so we have the path. Now we need to move all those full files that we just had there into our bin, because the data folder is a lot cleaner when it's over there. Plus, I want to show you how to move things properly. So we're going to just go into WoW server. We're going to find our paths. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to copy. So we're going to, let's move it actually. We're going to type move. Copy creates a copy, but you know, we're going to move. We're going to move cameras, DBC, maps, mmaps, vmaps. And we're going to move this to /env by hitting space /env /bin, right? Is it bin? Yep, it's bin. No, it's not bin. When you spam tab, it will show you. See, it just completed for me, so I can figure out if I'm right or wrong. So it's environment dist bin. Keep spamming tab. Now it shows me what's in there. And now I hit enter. It says, I can't do it. Permission denied. Once again, we should have used sudo. So now we hit enter, and now it's over there. So now we're going to go back to that directory, cd/environment. Dist bin. We're going to look inside, and now they're all over in here. Well, we're going to make a new directory. We're going to make a directory called data. Okay, we're going to sudo make directory called data. Now we're going to move maps, vmaps, cameras, and dbc all into the data folder. And once again, we have to sudo it. The reason, by the way, that we have to sudo it is because we don't own it. So unlike Windows, where you can just go wherever you'd like, essentially, Linux genuinely cares about whether or not you own a file. So in this case, you can see here that the maps file that we forgot to move over is owned by us, but the other files are owned by root. You see here, for example, the only way we can see this is with the -l command that I mentioned earlier on why it would be needed, because ls is like that, and -l shows you. So we have to make this entire folder essentially ours. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back a directory, and we're going to type, if I remember this correctly, chown wow, with this beautiful symbol, wow, bin. It's going to say it's not permitted, so we're going to have to sudo it. And now we own it. So now if we go into bin, we're just going to quickly check it really quick. You see now it's owned. Wow, we own it now. This is basically user and group, because Linux does it based off of groups as well. Now, keep in mind, though, that the etc. folder is still root, but we'll show you that in a moment. When I go into bin, not sure why I said wow, you'll see, once again, now if I just move maps into data, it gives me an error, which is very strange. And the reason for that is because the data folder is owned by root. So while we made the folder root, we didn't make everything inside of the bin folder. Sorry, we made everything wow. We didn't make everything inside the folder wow. So we have to go back up to our chown command, which we just did, and we have to type -r. I can't remember if it's lowercase or uppercase, but we're going to find out. Okay, it's capitalized then. Capitalization, it is. And you'll see now, it took a moment. And we do ls-l. We go into bin, ls-l. Everything is now as it should be. So now we move maps into data. Now, I'm showing you this video in a longer format and going about everything in a very quote-unquote unorganized pace because I want to show you that it's okay if everything is not just instantaneous, everything goes according to plan, and voila, you have a server. I think it's very important that you are able to see my troubleshooting for when you run into an issue later down the road, because at the end of the day, these are videos that may last years and years to come, and it may be that you're not able to contact whoever created this video, aka me, or whoever creates other videos as to how to do this, and then you're off Googling, or using AI. So I would prefer it if you learned by seeing my mistakes. Now, let's go into data, and now we have everything here. Wonderful. So now if we go back, we can try to run the world server, which is by /world server, and it'll say failed to open file, environment, dist, etc. world config. Okay, let's try to sudo this file. So it still failed to open the file. So now let's see what's going on here. So it's definitely not an administration issue, but it is a file name issue. So if we see here that there's a .dist behind each one of our files, even the db import .dist. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go into these files and update them. Now, because we do not own these files, because remember, we did not chown these files yet, they're all owned by root, we're going to go back and make this easier so we don't have to sudo everything. Excuse me. And go into chown and change from bin to etc. And now when we ls-l, we can see that's owned by WoW, and we can cd into etc. We ls-l, and we see that this is also owned by WoW. So now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to nano worldserver.conf, and we can see that this is the major config for everything related to your game. Now, there are some very important, just about everything's extremely important, but there are very important configurations. For example, your world port, the TCP port to reach the server, the bind address, the MySQL information that totally should not stay default, but we're totally going to leave it default for now. The, let's see, your login database threads, if you have more, I wouldn't touch that. And the data directory. Now, the data directory in particular is where the data file is, or the data folder. Now, if you want to have a logs folder, this is where you also create it as well. You just create a log directory, and voila. Same thing with your temp directory, anything that's temp. And if we scroll down, we can see that update databases are also enabled. I'm just scrolling down here to look. This is how you enable your SOAP. For example, if you want to have a store, then you're going to have to bind it to a specific address and enable it right here. You change it to 1. Remember to read all the blue lettering. I'm just scrolling down here with my scroll. And here is the logging for what you do and don't want logged. Let me see here. I'm just briefly glancing over this. This is a game type for whatever type of server. Pretty much, you're just going to want to read through this. Make sure that Warden's enabled. This is your anti-cheat. It's not the best, but hey, it works. This is your broadcasting, and keep in mind that Trinity Core is going to be slightly different than this as well. So you're going to want to be careful. Here's your GM commands, and here's your instant flights or your skills, your character saving. You want to make sure, by the way, just a quick heads up on a tip, you want to make sure your character saving is actually on like a 60-second to 3 minutes, maybe even less, honestly. Otherwise, players will get a bit upset if they have to go back 15 minutes if something crashes or whatnot. However, do keep in mind that the worse your host is, the essentially harder it's going to take a hit. This is disabling characters. These are the rates. These are the important parts that you should be aware of. The skill chances, and pretty much anything and everything that you want. Your deaths, I'm just running through stuff. Your quests, rewards, and your bonuses. There's so much in here. You could spend over 3 hours just modifying it to kind of tune how you want to do things in your server. Now, when you do modify it and you decide, hey, I'm finished, you do the Control X, press Y, then hit Enter, and now you have the file. Then from there, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make a copy of this distribution file. So you're going to type copy, world server. We're just going to hit tab to make it easy. World server, hit tab to make it easy again. And then backspace all this to just .conf. The same thing is going to be done with the auth server configuration. And once again, you should go through the auth server configuration just so you take a look at it. This is also very important. Just going again, the log directory, very important. The realm server port, the bind address is already there, good to go. And where is it? There's also the MySQL settings, which once again you have to modify. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to this. So, now that we modified that, we can try to run the world server. But wait, we forgot to check the other file, which is the DB import. So we're just going to casually copy that over as well. Oops, I forgot to do this properly. DB import. Now we're going to nano import. I'm just going to briefly look at this to see what this actually is. Okay, so this is just the importing file for the entire database. Wonderful. cben./world server. It may now say cannot connect to MySQL. Let's find out. And voila, look at that. Access denied for user acore at localhost using password yes. So now this is where we have to set up the MySQL, which is where things get slightly complicated before we even get onto this issue. So going back to our MySQL where we enabled it, we can essentially go to the IP address and log in currently, as far as my understanding takes. So what we're going to do is we're going to type ifconfig again, although I think it needs a space. No, it doesn't. And we're going to type the command of 192.168.4 485.61, and once again, you can just get this program essentially from online on your Windows machine. It doesn't matter. The default username is root, the default password is nothing, and the port is 3306. We're just going to try to connect. It says faithpc.lan is not allowed to connect to this MySQL server. So at least we didn't get a denial access, essentially. So what we're going to do is something else. We're going to try and troubleshoot this to figure out what is going on here exactly. So first things first, we're going to create a MySQL user. Well, it's really easy to do. I'm just going to show you the easiest route to doing this. You can go into a ChatGPT prompt or online and type, give me a list of commands to run in MySQL to create a MySQL user that can log in from anywhere. This is highly unsafe, but hey, we're going to take a look here. Please keep in mind. Okay, here we go. Create user at username identified by your password. Grant all privileges to username at %sign with grant option flush privileges. This is in fact a correct command line. This is how you do it. So in this case, we're going to go into MySQL, sudo MySQL, and we're going to type in create user at, we're going to call it Matthew Napier, and then at %sign identified by wowza with symbol. Enter. Grant all privileges on beautiful sign to Matthew Napier, and I'll explain to you what this exactly does and how to read this in just a moment. %sign with grant option. Flush privileges. There we go. So essentially, we created the MySQL user Matthew Napier at IP address. So in this case, anywhere in the world. So keep that in mind. If you want to use it, for example, your own IP address, then you would type, say, for example, your local IP address. Or you can make it, for example, anywhere in the world with grant option, which basically says, you know, with your permission, grant all permissions to user. So identified by password, then grant all permissions on, aka all databases, to Matthew Napier with grant option, and then flush privileges, which I don't understand why it's called flush, basically means apply. So now that we're done, we can hit exit, and it says bye because it's nice. Now we're going to go back, and we're going to try to connect via MySQL once again. It's going to say no, but now we have to type in Matthew Napier, and we're going to type in wowzer. And you'll see here, it allows us. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hit, well, yes, of course I want you to save. And now it's going to allow us to connect over. Now, the reason why we're doing this is just because instead of running all these commands and making it really annoying, we're just going to hit the 2-person arrow. We're going to type add, and we're going to bring in whatever passwords and usernames we want inside of our world server. In this case, we want to make this super easy, and this is not about security or anything else so far. So what we're going to do is we're going to just type acore. We're going to grant global permissions. Okay, let's see here, and that will do the trick. And voila, localhost, and we're just going to quickly hit clone. And 127.0.0.1, and we're going to save. And, oh, it has an empty password. My mistake. Acore. We're going to save. Why is it still saying empty password? Acore. So this one is fine. This one is not. Sometimes you run into this issue, and you just have to manually create it from scratch. It just happens. Okay, we're going to save again, and voila, see, the issue is now gone. So now it has global permissions, which is across the board. Again, please, for the love of God, if you're doing this publicly, do not do this. This is just the setup originally. Please see the security side on how to secure things a little bit better, essentially. Excuse me. Now, what we're going to do furthermore is we're going to go back, dot two dots, ls cd bin ls / world server, and now it's going to ask us some questions. The auth server doesn't exist. Do you want to create it? Please. Let's see here. Acore characters doesn't exist. Do you want to create it? Yes. The Acore world doesn't exist. Do you want to create it? Yes. And now it's going to apply all the SQL that is from the files, aka the core, into the database. Now, if we head to HideSQL, we can see here live that's creating these databases. Now, these databases have all your data in it. Your characters, your accounts, everything is in this. Now, let's go over a few while we wait. Now, your Acore auth is very important. Typically for an auth server, you would have this as a standalone server, if you will. Now, for here, you have realm list. Now, in your realm list, you have your name, your address. This usually has to be defined and changed to be open, so we're just going to make it 0.0.0.0. I'm kidding. You don't want to do that. You want to do that with your actual IP address. As well as your port is fine and your security level is 0. This is, for example, if you only want GMs to be able to access your server and not everyone. Then you set the allow list to be 1 or 2 for GMs, depending on how many ranks, population, and game builds and everything else. Now, if you go to the wiki page of Azeroth Core, you can pretty much, or Training Core, you can pretty much figure out what each one of these does. So, for example, you see the flag means number 2. Well, what does number 2 flag mean in Azeroth Core? Well, if we go to Google on my other screen, Azeroth Core realm list, I'll show you. Just by typing that, we can go to the top search result. And you see here, if we scroll down, it tells you what each one means. So in this case, for flag, it tells you that number 1 means development. Number 2 means it's United States, so it's going to show up as United States category, essentially. Now, what was the other one? The other part that's extremely important to change right off the bat, other than changing this to your IP address so you can actually connect and your friends can have fun, obviously other than changing your name, is to create an account. However, you can't create an account quite yet. By the way, this is where all your account data is going to be stored, including your characters, and this is where all the world data, such as creatures, achievements, and everything that we're going to be diving into, is located here. You shouldn't really have to mess with the auth database whatsoever, nor should a dev, so there's no reason for them to even be inside of it. If they ever have to say, well, I have to create a database or a table, not a database, I have to create a table inside the auth server in order to get this to work. They do not. They can create a separate database and go from there. Now, that being said, of course, there are special occasions, but do not trust it. That being said, we're almost done now. So now we're checking out world. VMAP support included. Failed to find map files for starting areas. Now we're going to find out if those map files are actually going to work or not. So we're going to cd into data, ls it, and we're just going to run a command called pwd. This command allows us to get the current path that we're at. We're going to copy this. We're going to go back. We're going to go back. We're going to go into cd, etc. We're going to nano world, worldserver.conf. We're going to go down. And we are going to find the data folder. Now, if you can't find it, even though it's right here, what you can do is hold down Control, hit W, and type data. Okay, there's data, data. Okay, there's data. Oops, Control, data. You see where I'm going with this. It's basically the search command. So, that being said, eventually, if you can find the correct thing, such as, I don't know, directories, where you have a keyword, it'll bump you right there. Now, the directory, we're going to paste the exact location where the directory is. We're going to save, and we're going to quit, and we're going to take a look. Now we're going to rerun this, and you can see here that it is now accepting the files, which makes it very much so easier, so we don't have to worry about anything else. Now, you may see here, can't set process priority class, error permission denied. This is simply because it needs to be ran under sudo. Are you surprised? I'm not. Now everything's going to start loading, it's going to start generating, and voila, we now are essentially in here. So now what we can do is we can create an account. We can do account, create, WoW, Wowzer. Account created. Now we're going to have to set the GM level. So now we're going to do account, set GM level, Wowzer, 3, -1. And now you change the security level of Wowzer to 3. You might be asking yourself, how did you do that? Well, if we go over here to Azeroth Core GM commands on Google, you can see here that it is strictly all in this list. You can go right here and it'll tell you what the security levels requirement is. Level 4 is terminal access, so it specifically requires you to write it in the terminal. And level 3 is basically highest GM level currently. That's why it's level 3, for example. So in this case, you're going to type account create, account name, password, just like you saw here, or account delete, account, and voila. Now you'll notice right here that there's a dot. Usually that's just because you have to type it in game. You don't do that inside the terminal itself. You can type that in game. So technically speaking, you can run this command here inside of the game, or this one too, and so on and so forth. Now, other than this, now you have a running server. It is running. What you can also do now is you have to run another terminal. In this case, if you were running it on your Windows machine, you'd have to open up another terminal as well. And now we have to run the auth server. So now we're going to run the auth server, and you're going to see that it was added at said address at 8085. That's awesome. However, as much as I like to say it, I'm not going to be able to directly connect to it because I don't want to dox my IP address. So, I will show you how you can do this as soon as I can confirm that my IP address is not in this file, because that would also, once again, be awkward. Perfect. Is you can go to your client file, which would be right here, data, ENUS, realmlist.wtf, edit notepad. You're going to have a notepad pop up, and it's going to say set realm list, and you're going to put your IP address of the server. Now, once you do that, you will be able to connect, okay? You will be able to. You will be able to. I promise you that. However, keep this in mind. You have to set the IP address of your server inside of your auth table, which is right here, your realm list. Right here. Extremely important. The other thing to keep in mind here is you have to make sure as well. Now, in order to restart your servers and have it auto restarting so you don't have to worry about it, or say you just want it running so you can close out the terminals and not have to worry about them shutting down, or say computer restart, whatever it is, you can do a few things. So you can do PM2, which I use, which is sudo apt get install node.js npm-y. That just says, hey, I want everything to be approved. To which then we're going to download all the required files. And then after this is complete, then what we're going to do is we're going to install the next one, which is the PM2 itself. And now what we're going to do is actually install the program itself. npm install-g PM2. Don't worry about all these colorful things popping up. It's nothing to worry about. And now that's installed, what we can do is run PM2. So, what we'll do is we will stop running by hitting Control-C on the machines. We'll allow it to halt. It's calming down. Wonderful. Now, what we'll do is we will type PM2 start just to see if it's going to start up. That's fine. We're going to type PM2 startup There we go. And now we're going to type, let's see here, PM2 save. Perfect. And now we'll type ls and then pm2./world server. Okay, let's try pm2 start world server. There we go. And now pm2.start./auth server. There we go. And now they're going to run on their own. Now what we'll do is we'll type the pm2 save again. And now we have it saved. Now, if the world server crashes or the auth server crashes, it will allow us to basically have it automatically reboot. Now, if we wanted to stop it, it's pm2 stop, then the ID number 1 or 2, 1, 2. And you can find a lot of these commands essentially by just Googling PM2 and then heading to their website and looking into all the cool stuff that you can do. I know this video was extremely long and probably the longest video in terms of setting up a server. However, I hope that this allows you to have a lot greater understanding as to how this actually works, rather than just watching a quick 10 to 15 minute YouTube video and not understanding anything. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video.